Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and friends and colleagues, and welcome back, and a warm welcome to those joining us via the live web streaming. I hope you're all really enjoying this year's NAPF annual conference, a 2020 Vision for Pensions. In 2020, we'll assess the pension performance of the government we'll elect next year, whether that's Steve Webb, Greg McClymont, or somebody else in the pension minister's hot seat. And so you'll be expecting me to set out what we want from that government between then and now. I certainly did that 5 years ago. In 2010, I said we wanted to see a simple state pension that gave everybody the very clear signal that it pays to save. And in 2010, I said we wanted to see large-scale schemes with members' interests at their heart, at the core of automatic enrolment. And in 2010, I said we wanted to see a debate on risk sharing. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that those things are now at the heart of government pension policy. So Steve, thank you very much for listening. And of course, today, the pensions debate is very much shaped by the Chancellor's announcement in March on freedom and choice in pensions. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that yesterday we had a really fascinating debate on freedom and choice and what that means in practice for schemes, but more particularly for scheme savers. And you heard my colleague Leslie Williams introduce us to her colleague Sam. So, today I'm not going to talk to you about the NAPF's priorities for 2020. Instead of that, I'm going to talk to you about Sam's, because, quite frankly, Sam's priorities should be our priorities. Now, Sam's one of those who's really benefited from the progress we've made over the last 5 years. Her state pension has gone from being one that's based on a formula so complex that only Steve Webb could work it out, to one which will give her a simple £7,500 a year. And for the first time, Sam's now saving in a private pension, thanks to automatic enrolment. And if Sam keeps on saving, and I know if Leslie Williams has got anything to do with it, Sam will keep on saving, Sam could look forward to a pension pot of around £60,000 by the time she comes to retire. But Sam now faces a bewildering array of choices when it comes to turning that pension pot into a pension income. And Sam may be one of those who's just not saving enough. And it's Sam who pays through higher management charges or the withdrawal of employer support every time well-intentioned but poorly targeted regulation adds to the cost of providing schemes. So that's why our manifesto, Pension Possibilities, we're publishing today for the next government, is about getting the future right for Sam and for millions like her. And I think there are 6 things the next government needs to do. First up, we need to agree what good retirement savings means for the long term. And once we've done that, we need to relentlessly pursue that vision. And we need to work out and we need to agree what role we want retirement savings, as opposed to any other type of savings, to play in people's lives, and what we need to do to cajole, nudge or force people towards that vision. And we need to advocate policies that take us towards that vision and challenge those that get in the way. But of course, all too often, governments make policies about the short term. They think about the immediate impact on their balance sheet, or they think about the next general election, or they think about the last opinion poll. And that simply doesn't work for us. We're interested in paying pensions over the long term, over the next 40 or 50 years, and there'll be another 8 or 9 general elections before Sam retires. So that's why our first recommendation for the next government is to create a new independent retirement savings commission to give us the stability we need and which Sam deserves. The commission will be charged with creating a new long-term view of good retirement savings system and holding government to account for delivering it. Now, we've seen that sort of bold depoliticising of big macro policy decisions elsewhere across the piece. It's the Monetary Policy Committee that sets interest rates, not Her Majesty's Treasury. And it's the Low Pay Commission that sets the rate of the national minimum wage, not the business department. And it's the Office for Budget Responsibility that tells us what the numbers are, so that government can't cook the books to flatter itself just before a general election. So it's now time for politicians to be brave when it comes to making policy decisions on pensions. That way we can ensure that the long-term interests of savers and not the short-term interests of politicians are at the very heart of pensions policy. Now, Steve has joked that the next government doesn't need a Minister for Pensions. He said, instead, there should be 2 ministers for work. Well, I'm not so sure I agree. I think there does need to be a Minister for Pensions in the next government, and the first thing he or she must do is to set up the Independent Retirement Savings Commission. Now, you'll have heard yesterday how Leslie told us that Sam's really grateful that she's now in her pension. She really appreciates the fact that she is finally saving. And that's really great news. But beyond that, Sam doesn't really have any engagement in her pension. She's like millions who just think they've got their kind of back of mind, I've got it sorted feeling. After all, she's in and her employer's in, and that's kind of all the advert says, isn't it? Well, that can be quite a risky attitude to take if there's no one there looking after the interests of scheme members. And so that's where, of course, trustees come in. It's their ability to blend their expertise with the members' interests that's an abiding strength of the British pensions system. And that ability has never been more important. But I do wonder whether we can maintain the standards we need today across so many schemes, 40,000 separate trust-based pension schemes. And all the evidence from the regulator shows that the quality of trusteeship is really quite variable. There are those trustees, those of you here in this room, who are doing a fantastic job safeguarding members' interests. But there are many other schemes where that's simply not the case. And that cannot continue. And that's why our second recommendation calls for a fundamental rethink of the regulation of trust-based schemes. The regulator tries to tackle that variability in quality through really the micro-regulation of trustee activities. Take the regulator's code on DC schemes. There's 149 musts and shoulds. And that's just the wrong way round. We're calling for stronger regulation of trustees and lighter touch regulation of trustee activities. We're saying the regulator should set and monitor challenging new criteria for trustee boards, challenging in terms of the overall experience and expertise of the board, and challenging in terms of the commitment of each individual trustee member to the scheme member's interests. And where a scheme meets those standards, well, it should just be allowed to get on with it. It means regulators here in the UK and in Brussels backing away from all those lists of musts and shoulds. Take disclosure as an example. Under what we're proposing, there'd be no more specifying the micro detail of every channel, form and frequency of communication to your members, the people you know best. And it would be no more pointless proposals setting out that savers here in Liverpool, Lille or Latvia all had to have the same 2-page benefit statement. Communication prescribed by bureaucrats does nothing to add to scheme member engagement. We know that very well. And we also know that there's only one person who pays, and that's Sam. So higher governance standards must mean greater freedom for trustees to do the right thing for their members. We've given scheme members freedom and choice. How about giving trustees freedom and choice as well? That's really going to help Sam. And I think it would mean an acceleration of the trend we're already seeing to larger scale schemes. Now, we know that large scale and good governance aren't absolutely synonymous, but they do tend to be found together. So the whole industry needs to push us towards higher standards of governance for trustee schemes. But I'd also add higher standards of governance for the new IGCs that are coming on stream. Now, we know that Sam's benefiting from automatic enrolment. We heard that yesterday. But not everyone's part of that success story yet. Take Sam's fictional brother, Dan. Dan's a barista, but he works for a small corner coffee shop. It only employs 4 people, so it's not going to hit its staging date until October next year. And it's easy to forget, with all the success that we talk about, deservedly so, around auto-enrolment, that there's still so much to do. Another 7 million employees to bring into automatic enrolment. 98% of employers still to hit their staging date. And we heard this morning on the panel on auto-enrolment just how hard this is and just how much those employers are going to need our help and experience in getting them through. So that's why our next recommendation for the next government is that it must give us, that next government, a clear, unambiguous and unequivocal statement and commitment that it will roll out automatic enrolment to all and roll out automatic enrolment to the current timetable. That will mean that employers can now plan with confidence, and it will give savers like Dan the confidence that they need that comes with easy access to a workplace pension. There can be no going back on the commitment that all employers must be covered by automatic enrolment. Now, as well as Sam and Dan, there's a third type of saver we mustn't forget. They're the sorts of savers that have been around for a while. They're the savers that are putting into DB schemes. And we know one. Sam and Dan's mum, Pam. Bear with me on this. Pam's worked for the same big employer throughout her children's lives. And she's a member of its DB scheme. And like many, many others, it's a scheme that's closed to new entrants but open to future accrual. In fact, there are about a third of the workforce in the same boat as Pam. And those schemes collectively have about £1 trillion worth of assets. So they're going to be around for a long time. They're going to be a prominent feature of the pensions landscape for decades. But of course, they've got a problem. We all know that. Because they've promised members like Pam a pension they won't be able to pay unless they can effectively match their assets with their liabilities. And the current £404 billion worth of supply of index-linked gilts is simply not enough to meet demand. And that means that prices are high. And with half of schemes now revaluing to CPI, I think there's an argument to be made that those assets are in any case doing the wrong job. And that's why our recommendation for the next government is that it must give the Debt Management Office an objective to take the insufficient supply of index-linked assets into account when advising government. Now, you'll all know that there's another type of inflation-linked asset that I'm really interested in, and that's infrastructure. It's a perfect asset class, or should be the perfect asset class, for pension funds wanting to match those long-term liabilities. It's a perfect proxy for gilts, but it's not easy to invest in. And that's why we've been working over the last few years to set up the Pensions Infrastructure Platform. And you heard Ruston talk about that yesterday. So we've done our bit. We've met George Osborne's challenge, British pension funds for British infrastructure. It's now time for the government to do its bit of the job. Now, it has supported the development of the PIP, and we're really grateful for that. But where's its strategy now for making sure that when pension funds come to the market with money, there are the type of assets that pension funds want and need to invest in? And why is it that the tax system still favours the exact opposite of what PIP and pension funds want? It favours short-term, high-risk investors within traditional fund structures and, I might add, expensive fund structures. So that's why we're calling on the government to really answer these questions and unlock large-scale infrastructure suitable for long-term investors like pension funds. And because it's so important, not just to pension funds, but to the economy as a whole, we want a new minister with sole responsibility for infrastructure to be responsible. Now, while we're talking about new initiatives to help DB schemes, let's not forget about current initiatives to oppose. And I'm talking here, of course, about the holistic balance sheet and the fact that AOPA will not give up its fight to introduce a holistic balance sheet for pension schemes. And that means we cannot give up our opposition to the holistic balance sheet either. We've got a unique and strong DB funding and protection regime in the UK, including the TPR, and we heard this morning from the TPR, backed by the Pension Protection Fund, and strong sponsor covenant regulation. But the holistic balance sheet would do nothing but increase deficits in the UK by £450 billion for no gain, but for a real loss for people like Pam. So that's our message for the next government. Oppose the introduction of a holistic balance sheet, plain and simple. And when Gabriel Bernardino speaks to our conference tomorrow, he must hear loud and clear our opposition to the holistic balance sheet. Now, so far we've looked at Sam and her family as a series of individuals saving in their own individual pension schemes. But you know, there's one thing the whole family needs, and that's help in understanding their options at retirement and support in making the right choices. And it seems to me that there's a risk that the whole freedom and choice agenda might just be going against the grain of how people want to approach retirement. You know, most people don't use their pension contributions to avoid paying tax. And most people don't use their pension pots to shield themselves from inheritance tax. And most people really don't want to bet on their own longevity, even if they knew how. Most people, in fact, 82% in our recent survey said, well, they just wanted their pension fund to be a pension. What they wanted was a regular, steady income in retirement. Now, make no mistake, the retirement income system for DC savers is broken. And we were shining a light on the failings in the annuities market long before it became fashionable to do so. 3 years ago, we said that £1 billion a year leaks out of the annuities market because it's a market that works in the interests of providers and not in the interests of savers. But nothing much has changed. So wouldn't it be nice if we really focused on fixing that? Because many people will still buy annuities, and for many people, annuities could be the right, and will be the right product. Instead of which, we've got new types of annuities. We've got flexi access drawdown. We've got uncrystallised funds pension lump sums. That really trips off the tongue. And we've got, of course, Lamborghinis. And to guide people through all of this, well, it's a 30-minute guidance guarantee conversation, a service which, with less than 6 months to go, simply doesn't exist. Now, of course, we support the development of the guidance service, and we're helping to develop it, but it's not enough. So my final recommendation, and our final recommendation for the next government, is on managing the risks of freedom and choice in the short term, and really making sure that over the medium term, people can leverage those benefits. People can really reap the benefits of the new freedom and choice. And that's why we're saying that the Independent Retirement Savings Commission must, as its first task, review the decisions that people make at retirement. And that's going to be vitally important as new products start to enter the market. I fear that as we see some of these new products coming on stream, we could be in for a mis-selling free-for-all. I'm old enough to remember that we've been there before, and I have absolutely no intention that we should go back there. So, together with the Financial Conduct Authority, the Commission must also monitor the products available to savers. Now, we don't know, and we shouldn't pretend to know, what the right choices for people are. But we must seek out evidence of wrong choices, poor value products, people paying excessive income tax bills, and we must take action to stop them. And we need to complement the guidance guarantee with much earlier, broader interventions to really make sure that people can make the most of automatic enrolment. A 30-minute interview a few months before you retire simply isn't going to cut it. Now, the ongoing review of the Money Advice Service gives us a really golden opportunity to do that. So let's see the next government giving MAS a specific objective to improve understanding of retirement options. And let's see MAS distributing its funding to deliver that objective through a range of partners, many of you here in this room, who've got the real expertise and the real connection with the SAMs, the PAMs and the DANs, to really, really help them make the most of freedom and choice in this new world of pensions that we're creating. So these are my recommendations for the next government. A new independent retirement savings commission so that long-term savings really works for the long term. A new challenging governance standards for trustees, not box ticking. A commitment to implementing automatic enrolment for the next 7 million workers. Inflation-linked assets, including infrastructure, to support DB schemes. And continued opposition to the ruinous holistic balance sheet. And finally, when it comes to helping people make good decisions in retirement, proper support for the ultimate beneficiaries of all of this, people like Sam. And when I stand up at the NAPF annual conference in Manchester in 2019, I really hope to be able to tell you that the next government listened to. Thank you very much.